My buddy here, Clayton Crozier.
Hi.
We were involved in this film footage back in 1938. The original intent was not to be historical by any means. It was a fundraising project that the local Oddfellows were involved in. And the preliminary picture here just shows some of the characters that were taking part in this play that eventually came about. The scene now is on East Main Street down by the Grand Union. And you notice Dick Sweet there and Sally Bate, Bruce Schofield. Sally was a local teacher. What teacher was she?
English. I think it was English.
Bruce ran a little three-piece swinging band in those days. And that's what the story starts out with. Now, we took various scenes around the community, and this happens to be out in Willow Pool, they call it. Near Travis. Yeah. You go past Black Watch Farms. Well, you've probably heard a lot about Black Watch Farms in their time between then and now. It's come and gone, but this pool, this picnic area is still there. And this particular day there happened to be a picnic of the local lodge of Oddfellows, and we see some of the town characters that were involved in it participating. This is Pop Sedor. He was a prominent citizen, and this is the sheriff's department that came down to demonstrate artificial resuscitation. Can you remember anything more about that, Crow?
Not too much about it, but it's pretty close to what we have today. But it shows at that time we had it.
Well, I don't know. They do it a little different today, don't they?
Well, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm afraid they do. You don't see anybody going like that anymore. They give mouth to mouth, Crows.
But we had it at that time. This is
yeah,
the point I'm trying to bring out, right?
Yeah, there was something. You see how the deputies dressed in those days. They were pretty well spicked out there. And apparently the patient was going to be carted back up to the hospital. Didn't have Sloper Wilm in those days, Crows.
No, we didn't. These are some of the families of the members of the Oddfellows.
You can see that the area, if you go out there anytime, you'll see that there's still a cow pasture across the creek, and the bridge that was there then, the people dive off of it, still probably the same bridge. And then the area looks pretty well the same. It's still a farm, and they, every summer, while they take advantage of the good weather and promote this place, and it's a lot less expensive than some of the other places, and nearby this nice little spot for the little kids particularly. There's a bridge I was talking about.
This was before the days of TV, right?
1938? I don't know.
At the advent of TV, I'd say, and at that time we had to have entertainment, activities, and this was our way of action.
I guess
there's a former town supervisor there.
I guess
it was a home run.
I guess we still get action today, but we aren't so many of us aren't glued to that boob tube. That's right. What you're trying to get across.
That's the point.
Yeah. And these are some of the fellows that participated in sort of a softball game that day. And just footage runs on. You'll see various people in the town, and we'll try to call some of them. Maybe you'll recognize them. There's a fellow named Ernie Hayes, for instance, and this is Clayton Crozier right there. And Deals in here and a few more. Of course, a lot of them, this is 42 years ago, so some of us aren't with us anymore. This switches now to our Oddfellows dances we used to have every Friday night, charged the sum of 25 cents and kept the kids off the street. We used to have pretty good crowds. You remember more about it, Clayton?
Well, we had a little bar there, but it was soda and soft drinks and the likes of that.
You scared me when you said bar.
One of the #1 piano players in the state. There we are. We had close to rock and roll at that time. They're really getting in there, and they have a real swing. There you go. There's the Lindy Hop. Isn't it the Lindy Hop?
You say so.
Go ahead, Carl. You got it.
I'm watching for the Shag because that was one.
Oh, the Shag.
Yeah, that's the. But they shook the building pretty well. That's Marie Herring, for example, and we carried on for 2 or 3 years, I think, doing this.
That's right.
It was fun. We never had any trouble. Never had to quiet any riots. Well, I don't mean to say riots, but any disturbances of any kind. It went off very smoothly.
It really helped our turnout, too, because it gave us a way out and a part of our entertainment, right?
I mean, it was a social part of our gathering.
Yeah, he was a crooner besides...
Oh, yes, he was a crooner. And there's a good example of the Shag. That's the Sullivan brother and sisters. They were real good dancers, not only in this type of dance, but all around. I don't know how many people do that today. Once in a while I try it, but I don't do too good no more, Crows.
Right. She happens to be a sister-in-law to one
All
of the
right,
former.
now we go back to the school. This is now what is now the nursing home. At that time it was, 1 through 12. I went there myself from about 3rd grade on, graduated, and Crows, you did too. This side over here was the elementary side, and if we went around the corner on Missouri Avenue, that was a high school sign. You see some of the kids coming and going, and I think that's the only bus we had in those days. And also, in a moment, we'll probably see a picture, just a quick view of Keegan and Sweet and Ingram, and there's cousins, I'm pretty sure. And these were the Bullocks. Oh boy, that's cool. That was the teaching staff in those days. I think that's Wilhelmina Kenny, and this kid just gave you the salute. That's Mike Berry. And now it's about time for the teachers to come barging in. They really walked fast in those days. I don't know. Well, they're not going too bad.
99% of the people walked to school at that time, too. We didn't have transportation, only that one bus that you mentioned before. And I think that was more for the people, the handicapped that couldn't make it. It would be a point to bring out anyway.
All right, now here's an elementary school extension, or whatever you call it. It was a temporary setup. It was down on South Avenue, where the post office is now. And before that, it was a garage and various other things, but mostly a garage. And this was a temporary thing which existed probably a couple of years, Crows?
I think so. It was very temporary, is right.
And it served its purpose right opposite the park. And looks like there's a lot of kids here, but Clayton says it seemed like a lot to us in those days. It doesn't amount to anything today compared to the change in the population.
You might especially notice the clothing that they're wearing. No leotards, no dungarees. They're dresses. That was the wear at that time. You know any of these
This is a
people?
guy, Leonard Montross, and then there's Bobby Montross there. Now, these are some of the Casey twins are here somewhere. That's them, I think. Yeah, okay. Now we switch to the church.
Which one
This
is
is
this?
Methodist parsonage. That's changed quite a lot since then. They've did some addition and connected the parsonage and the church together. That time a fellow named Ochiltree was a pastor. And it's just down the street from the nursing home that was the previous high school. And after that, the high school moved out of there. It was a factory for a while before it became a nursing home. And even for a time it laid idle, and it was kind of a shame, but now it's been put to good use, and so it serves a very noble purpose. We took some of the local businesses and viewed them, and this happens to be Jerry Cashin.
And it represents his business with his son delivering milk to the customers. At that time, this was very common. Groceries were delivered, fruit and vegetables, and so on. And milk was the #1 delivery to the homes.
There had to be 3 or 4 different companies running up the same street, and you know what that did eventually. It eliminated a whole bunch of them.
Now we got to the Rose's. This is Rose's garage. He was one of the first local garage mechanics, not too far from the present school. At that time, he painted cars in a way that was way above what we have today.
That shot you just saw was a Presbyterian church. You'll notice that the trees are large and old, and eventually they had to come down. And now that it's entirely different looking thing. Now we go to Houstonville. Everybody knows where Houstonville is, right, Crows?
Well, yes, they should. It's not only a stone's throw from Wappingers Falls.
On the way to Beacon.
On the way to Beacon is right.
Just lost some friends, okay. This is Homer Holmes' garage. He was a very well-known person during these days, his son Jerry. And you'll notice one of the people involved in this with his, 33 Ford?
33 Ford.
That's
That's
it there?
one of the,
Yeah.
well, the second year for the V8. That's
That I
it.
don't know, but anyhow, they had a hoist in those days. They were very proud of it. It was outside, and not too many people seemed to have those, but they thought that was just great. And next shot I think will be a Saki Sheffield. Saki was, oh, that's Homer, that's the proprietor of the place. His cigar was always present. And Saki was a well-known county athlete. I played basketball with him, as a matter of fact, and gave him heck for doing the double dribble all the time. And he was a catcher of note, and he caught till he was about 45. This is Abbott Hardware next door. I always say those rakes and brooms probably the same, probably the same ones that were there.
Still
there,
today.
yeah.
Still operating today.
This coal yard was operated by a fellow named Ostin. It was called Ostin Install. They had big bins there to store the coal, and they delivered it in his truck. And it seems that, you know, we've gone a complete cycle since that time. And coal went out of the picture. Nobody heated with coal anymore. Everything was oil and gas. Now all of a sudden we're getting back. There's Mr. Stahl, the proprietor. It looks like a ringmaster.
This happened to be in New Hamburg, by the way, right near the railroad, where they had the railroad cars came in and loaded their silos.
Yeah, not too far from the bridge that we used to call a drawbridge. They just resurfaced it, had a little controversy over it. This Millard Lumber Company down by the marina, White's Marina, and most of it is gone now, and that time was quite a big installation. Willis Phillips was a prominent citizen of Houstonville and a fire company commissioner that organized a company there back in those days. And you can see some of the people that worked there. Rose, you got any ideas on this?
Well, most of their lumber came by boat from the west coast, and this is one reason for being on the river, because it was handy for deliveries.
Yeah, this is a fellow named Wilkerson, and I think he was a part owner of the company. Most of the material was delivered. Of course, a lot of it is still delivered today, but due to the fact that there weren't as many private automobiles, or was very few station wagons in those days, wasn't it?
Right.
And pickups, the only fellows that had pickups were the people that were in business of some kind. So they had to deliver most of the material, and this Crow Shed it's located on the river and by the railroad tracks. Now, a fellow who ran this film was named Len Montross, and he was a veteran, and he had a thing about Castle Point that he liked very much, so he went down there with his camera and took this footage. I don't know too much about Castle Point except for the fact that it was almost, the government almost did away with the whole facility, but Congressman Resnick, who was quite an active congressman during his reign, was the one who saved the facility and kept it going.
Now we're back on 9 between Wappingers and Fishkill. At that time, most of your restaurants were more or less the home type restaurant, and as you can see, this is pretty much like a home, and there's the living room. At that time, your meals were very inexpensive, as you will probably see with some of their signs. You might even recognize some of these people.
If you Gladys Timbo works in the town assessor office. This tea room, what did it eventually burn, didn't it, Cross?
Yes, it did. There we are.
Now we're on the corner again where Dairy Queen is, right?
We're picking up the...
Foster.
This is more the garage, yeah, right. George K. Foster. We're going back now.
Right up at the end of the turn across from Uri Hardware. And you can see we had a lot of compact cars in those days, too. Look at that. They got good service. How about it, huh?
That was the #1 objective in that time, was service.
Well, you mean...
Not price, but service. And,
well, price wasn't too bad either, Cross.
5 gallons of gas for $1 at that time.
Yeah, even I'd sold 7 for $1. Okay. That's got nothing. But anyhow, these fellows ran a good station. And right next door, a little bit to the north, where the pizza place is, right?
Right
it's
near
probably
the
this
pizza place.
white spot. And you'll see as this comes along, prices for dinner. 75 cents, chicken and steak, meatballs, spaghettis, 35. I think you could have a hard time duplicating that today, wouldn't you, Cross?
I would say so. Here's one of the owners. Is he one of the owners,
No,
Carl, or is he?
The owner's on the left there. This is Dominic Napoleon. He was a village trustee for a number of years and active in village politics. And that's Popman Boris. He had a couple kids that graduated from this school, were good athletes.
Now we're leaving Wappingers toward the bottom of the big hill. Most of you know there it is, Casper Creek, a big dairy farm on the right-hand side. There's that little pond that you see in front at near the Camelot Inn that just had a recent fire. Back further, you'll see, a little later on, you'll see the farm building, and at that time, Paul Kerr was the man that owned it, was named Brookland Farms.
One of his daughters eventually was on the Board of Education in the Central School. Back at this place is a big housing development now. Most of the land is not farmed, and there's no dairy there anymore.
This gives you right here, it gives you an idea of the production methods at that time. Of course, today it's changed drastically.
It's all big time today, that's right, all machine.
There you go, you're going back into the farm area now where...
This is one of his prize bulls. You can see that this guy was a good size, and he could make a little dust fly when he got going there. This is Paul and his children, and of course they're all grown up now. Like I said, one of them probably was on the Board of Education.
Now we're back to church. This is happens to be St. Mary's Church.
And their school. The school was on the left there.
Right.
They've made some changes over the years too. The parsonage has changed all around, and at that time it looked like it was separated, and it was an individual house, so to speak. But now it's modernized, and the church has been there many, many years, and it's it's withstood the age very well. They keep it up. As you can see, they were doing some construction at that point. And next door on the left, as I said, is the school, and they've made many changes there too, and they've made a lot of changes on Convent Avenue, where the sisters live. Most of the teachers in the school are sisters, but there are some lay teachers involved yet. And as we mentioned before, the children's dress were different in those days. There were no dungarees or fancy clothes. The boys wore ties, and the dress was all ties, and the dress was all a lot different. It was in both schools, the parochial schools and the private schools and the public schools, I'm saying. You know any more comments on that?
Well, you'll notice that most of these kids are walking home. They're not walking to a bus. So you people today are lucky to have transportation to and from school. Outside of that, you can get an idea of the number of people that attended the school. It gives you a rough idea in the age group.
We switched now to some of the firemen. We had two fire departments in Village then, as we do now, the Johnsons and the Garners. And this is the Johnsons. Hank McCluskey and Joe Burnett, they were big wheels in the organization at that time, and they kept the company up and going through the years, and we still compete with one another more or less when there's a fire. That is between the Johnsons and the Garners.
There's a fire right now. See how fast they respond to that? Now we're going to one of the local merchants. He was one of the best. This was one of the best meat markets in the village at that time. Beside the supermarkets, there were individually owned stores, and this was one of them. And he employed maybe 3, did he? Beside his 2 brothers, he had a couple brothers, and at that time they had a delivery
system.
Take it.
Okay. We saw Mario Paggi. He was a well-known citizen of West Side, and we saw Nestor Kelly and his sister Tess Fulton, and they kept this business going on West Main Street for a number of years. But now it's a shoe store up there, right?
I believe it is.
I think that's a guy named Gus who was working there. Well, then we go down the street a ways next door to the County Players and Marie's Pastry. Now Marie cooked all these goodies, and you can see the prices in those days: a quarter for a cake and 22 cents for a pie. And they were real good articles too. She not only did that, but she did bread and rolls, etc. And they delivered them to the people. They had peddlers in those days, most of them. The people didn't have to go to the store. Some of them didn't have cars, as a matter of fact, and it was brought to them. The picture we'll see pretty soon of Knight Brown and his brother. At that time in their lives, they were delivering for Marie. And they used to run all over the village and all over the town making these deliveries. And again, we point out that not so many people, there wasn't a car in every garage in those days, right, Krug?
That's right. You can see quite a variety here, and here goes some of our delivery fellas there. It's Knight Brown. Is that Knight?
That's right.
Knight and his brother Keith.
That's right.
They're ready for a delivery.
Gives you a shot of West Main Street looking up the hill. Next door now is the County Players. One time they used to be called Academy of Music, and they used to play big basketball games there, Yeah, semi-pros.
Semi-pro,
They
right.
used to have Big Five and Newburgh, Poughkeepsie, and Wappingers. They had some real big ding-dong games.
That's a,
This
that's,
is,
go ahead.
no, it's a spillway, you know, about opposite the county players now. Shows that the water at that time was going over the dam, same as it is now, but some of it was funneled into a penstock or pipe, and it ran down to an electrical plant or power station. Power station furnished power for the bleachery, and before that, way back when they first had electric lights in the village, it was a Wappingers Electric Company, and they used to furnish electricity for the
Right.
whole town, or not town, the village.
Now we're
There's-
going left across the bridge on the way up East Main Street.
Looks about the same in some respects.
The bank is in the same place. They didn't-
I noticed the lights. I like to have those ornamental lights back on the bridge, but we can't seem to locate whatever happened to them. And you can see the falls down below. And back in the old days, along this line, there used to be buildings before you come to this bleachery. There's the big bleachery itself. That time they employed about 300 people. And they processed the goods, and made sheets and pillowcases, and that sort of thing.
Well, more or less, these buildings were the backbone of the community. It started with your bleaching and finishing of cloth. This is the dye works, bleachery, and so on. This is more or less how your village of Wappingers
Oh, yeah.
got started. Some of the employees.
These buildings you see in the background, they're still there. They're used now by smaller outfits that rent them. Well, let's see. You remember some of the names that are down there now? I can't.
Not really. There's a handprints, I think, and a few other small, maybe shoe place.
There's Marie Herring going out, and there's Mayor Temple's wife, and there's a guy named Bill McCart.